Hello, my favorite Sierra Middle School students. Today in this center, we are going to go over our notes that we did on Friday. I want you to be in the habit of taking out your notes throughout the week to use as a study guide and to also add to those notes when you have new information. So today we're going to be highlighting some key terms. I have also added a slide of your essential content questions for this lesson. I want you to be able to answer these questions at the end of the lesson. You're going to either include these questions with answers on a separate piece of paper, or you can write them and answer them on the back of your Cornell notes. The first question is, explain the difference between balanced and unbalanced forces. The next one says, how do you describe force? And the last one is, explain how you calculate net force. So what is a force? We're going to go ahead and highlight force in this section at the very beginning. A force is a push or a pull. A force changes the motion of an object. We have some illustrations at the bottom of push and pull. You do this every day throughout the day several times. I want you this week especially to be thinking of some examples that you do at Sierra Middle School and at home that would fall under the example of force. Some examples include picking up or putting down a backpack, throwing, catching, hitting, kicking, or stopping a ball, typing on a keyboard, turning a key, or even writing with a pencil. So if you don't already have your example included on your Cornell notes, please go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and do that now. Force is a vector. You're going to highlight that entire sentence. Force is a vector. Remember from motion, a vector is a quantity that has both size and direction and is usually displayed as an arrow. So you notice in this picture here, this gentleman is walking his dog. That dog is bigger, it has a bigger mass. It's showing that it has a greater size, a greater magnitude with that length of the arrow, versus the little dog over here pulling his owner on a leash. He has a little arrow here, so it's a much smaller force than the big dog. Go ahead and also highlight the words that I have listed here: vector, size, and direction. Those were the terms that you hand wrote on your notes on Friday. The next slide is talking about net force. Net force is the total force acting on an object when all forces are combined. Key word there is all forces are combined. Force units are known as newtons. Go ahead and highlight newtons. And remember to include direction. Very important, so we're going to highlight that as well. To calculate net force, we're going to be using simple addition and subtraction, but you need to pay attention to what the scenario is so you know when to add and when to subtract. So when we add, it's going to be forces moving in the same direction. Let's go ahead and add forces, or highlight, add forces moving in the same direction. That entire sentence there. And an example will be, Bill is pushing on a box with a force of 7 newtons to the right. Sarah pushes in the same direction with a force of 4 newtons. So the net force equals 11 newtons to the right. So that's going to be an example of when we need to add. We will subtract forces moving in opposite directions. So on your notes, go ahead and highlight that entire sentence. An example of that will be, Joe pushes a ball downward with 4 newtons of force, while Jenny pushes the ball upward with a 3 newton force. They're working against each other, right? They're in the opposite direction, so we'll need to subtract here. So the net force equals 1 newton downward. Balanced forces. Balanced force is when the net force of an object is 0. The object's motion does not change. So remember last week when we did the lab when you had a partner and you had the ball on the table and you pushed with equal force, that ball did not move. Go ahead and highlight balanced forces on this part of the notes. Oops. And then on your notes, I don't have it on this slide, but on your notes it says results in no motion. Highlight that entire sentence as well, please. An example of balanced force is when two basketball players are pushing on the ball in the opposite direction with equal force. So if one player is trying to get the ball in the hoop and the other player is trying to block that, they're both pushing in the opposite direction with equal force. So that ball is going to stay right there. It's not going to move. Another example is the picture I have included on the slide. Two people pushing on the toy truck below in the opposite direction with equal force. And again, if you do not have your own example of a balanced force on your notes, go ahead and pause the slideshow, and include that now, please. Unbalanced force. Let's go ahead and highlight that. An unbalanced force is when the net force of an object is not zero. When a net force acts on an object, the motion of that object always changes. So let's go ahead and highlight that sentence, force changes the motion of an object, on your notes. So if the object is moving or not moving, it will move. If the object is moving, it'll either stop, change speed, or change direction. Some examples of unbalanced forces are going to be two basketball players pushing on the ball in the opposite direction with unequal force. So again, in that situation, if one player is trying to put the ball in the hoop and the other player is trying to block him, if one of those players is stronger than the other or just using more force than the other, then that ball is going to go in the direction, or the opposite direction of whoever's pushing with the most force. Or in this picture I have included on the slide, if only one person is pushing on the toy truck, that's going to be an example of unbalanced force, and that truck is going to move. So key here is you remember, if it's an unbalanced force, the object is going to move. There will be motion. So if you do not have an example of an unbalanced force on your notes, please pause the video and include that now. And we're back to our essential content questions. So again, either write these with complete sentences on a separate sheet of paper or go ahead and write them on the back of your Cornell notes. First one says explain the difference between balanced and unbalanced forces. If it's easier for you, go ahead and include an example of what the difference is going to be. Give me some key points to what makes those different. If you'd like, you can even draw a Venn diagram to compare and contrast those. Second one, how do you describe force? Tell me in your own words, what is force? And the third one, explain how you calculate net force. What is net force and how do we calculate that? Go ahead and use complete sentences again, and when you are finished, please give them to Miss Ayala so she can check them off, and then let either Miss Ayala or myself know that you're ready to move to the next center. Thank you.